How many of you here are developers? How many of you are not developers? Okay. So a little introduction for myself. I started out as an electrical engineer, ended up running some businesses, so I kind of got some business background added to that. I ended up going into finance, and so then I got interested in economics. So I don't know what I am, but that's the story if anybody's interested about how I got into trying to create a new kind of digital medium of exchange. So to get us kind of started, I want to ask you what you love about cryptocurrency, what you love about Bitcoin. And I'm going to use the term Bitcoin a lot, and I kind of mean the whole family of Bitcoin, okay, of digital cryptocurrencies. So when I say that, that's what I'm talking about. Let's hear from you. What is it that we love?
I apologize. I was late because I was on the greeting committee. We were riding a balloon and they say come up here because Matt's trying to come. So Matt's anxious to get here. What I love about this, I love about the fact that honestly, the word that comes to mind is just hope.
Okay.
It's just hope. It's just hope that humanity has a better solution than what we've been living with.
Okay, let's go rapid fire. Who else?
I love the sovereign nature.
Sovereign nature of Bitcoin. Okay. Anybody else?
Decentralized.
Decentralized. I'll put a few of my ideas up here. Does this match your list? Or are there any other things up there that you like? Sovereign was a good way to say it. Is there anything you don't like? Is there anything that we've been disappointed with in the last 10 years that we would like to have seen it done better?
I don't like how centralized Bitcoin has become.
Okay. Any other rapid fire ideas? So it's becoming maybe too centralized, not as decentralized as we would like in some ways.
Maybe some privacy. Better privacy.
Better privacy.
Scalability.
Better scalability.
Transaction speed.
Faster.
Market story. Just the whole market story has kind of brought it into a space that didn't let it go where it was meant to go.
Okay, so what would you have liked to have seen it accomplish that it has not yet accomplished?
I see it more as an investment tool right now rather than a transaction tool. I'd like to see a transaction tool.
Okay, here's some ideas I had, and I think this matches up a little bit with some of the things that you've said. Maybe a couple of extra ones here. Is there anything I'm missing that's a big feature? When you say market story,
Just that idea that it's like, oh, you can invest and make lots of money. It's rather than it being peer-to-peer transactional, like he was saying, rather than it making it day-to-day usefulness, becoming adopted, it kind of got categorized into this investment portfolio, which destroyed the peer-to-peer fungibility of it every day. So it was almost kind of got its own story that ended up taking away from that intent.
All right, I like that. Okay, how many of you in the audience are this guy? Is there anybody here who just feels like the more the merrier, that's great? Or okay, the more the merrier, we got one. Anybody else? These are valid opinions. Okay, and is there anybody who says, you know, I wish it was just Bitcoin specifically? I wish we all would adopt one and that could kind of become the standard.
Just Dogecoin. I'm happy with one, and then we can move on to the rest of the three.
I think the answer would be I'd like a protocol that they were all associated to.
Okay.
So that there's some form of reason behind how it moves around.
Okay.
I think as long as they're all able to be traded on like the foreign exchange market, then you can price check them.
Okay.
And I think it doesn't really matter.
So then it's the more the merrier. So one of the things I want to tell you about my chips is that it's not another coin. Okay? I call it TCP/IP for value, and I want to explain what I mean by that. My chips is really a protocol. It's definitely not a coin. It's a way of transmitting value over a digital medium. It's a way to exchange value. And so I made this graph. I'm using AI now to create some of my graphs, and I explained what I wanted, and I really like it. My chips is just kind of like a superhighway. It's a conduit. It's a way of talking over the internet to exchange value. And I think Bitcoin can be one of those assets that can be exchanged. And to that extent, the more the merrier. I think any digital asset that you want to put on this bus can be exchanged and transacted. But what you're going to find out is that MyChips is going to be that thing that becomes the transactional medium, not the investment medium. And so I want to go into that a little bit. In the old days, how many of you here are old like me that can predate TCP/IP? When I was in school, we had a VAX and we had a PDP computer and an HP computer, and they were all different. And when networking came along, it took a little bit of effort, but eventually all of these different systems were able to transact. And that eventually became very transparent, and files could move transparently from machine to machine. And MyChips is a way for value to move transparently from one person to another. And it's very, very much, I think, is going to take us to some of the values that we think are still missing in the digital sphere. Okay? So it's primarily a medium of exchange. We're going to seek to become both a reference point and a medium of exchange. And by inert proxy for value, we'll explain a little bit more of what we mean about that. So in order to get into this, I want to develop some terminology with you, because we use a lot of terminology in different ways. And if I say the word money to 10 different people, they're going to have 10 different ideas about what is money. And we were just having a discussion on the way up here about what does the term money mean. So I want to ask you some questions. And I don't think there are really any wrong answers here, because again, we all have different ways of using these words. So respond quickly and tell me, is Bitcoin money?
Yes.
Okay, got a yes. I got a wavy thing. Okay?
Not yet.
And when I say is, I'm talking about by definition. Is it by definition money, or is it money, or is it something that can be used as money, or is it something else? So I've got a yes, I've got a couple of maybes. Let's ask you some more questions. Is the dollar money? For you developers, equal, equal, equal. Money. Yes, I got one yes. Do I have any other
Yes.
nods? You seem pretty confident that the dollar is money. Is gold money?
Yes.
In Utah for sure.
Okay.
It's here called real money.
It's impractical money.
Okay.
To define money.
Is so I want to push the boundary. I want to push the boundary on this a little bit. Here's the Utah gold back. Okay, so you all think that's money. Here is a Zimbabwe dollar. Actually, it's 100 trillion Zimbabwe dollars.
A little bit of inflation right there.
Is this money?
Yeah.
In a market,
Fiat money.
in a certain market, it is money.
Okay, so kind of a provisional answer. You all said gold is money. Is steel money?
In a certain market.
Depends on how it stands.
Okay, and remember again, there's equal, equal, equal money, and there's can be used as money, has been money, thought of sometimes as money. Is steel, which of those categories is steel in? Starting to doubt a little bit, okay? We're starting to waffle a little bit. What is it about gold that makes gold money and makes steel not money?
You can pay your taxes with
It's more universally accepted.
the US dollar. You can't with steel.
People accept it as value.
Can you pay your taxes with gold? I'll say a market.
Probably.
I think it is.
Not directly.
Okay, I haven't heard anybody say scarcity yet. That's the answer I usually get on this. Is that what makes gold more money than steel? No, I'm seeing some yeses. So I did a little research. There's an element called tellurium, which is 4 times more rare than gold, and it trades for about $100 a kilogram. Okay, so way more scarce than gold. but it's not as valuable as gold. So, okay, so I have a lot of question marks. Let's try one more. Is salt money?
No.
Less than 100 years ago.
A couple thousand years ago.
Yeah, no.
I think my definition for whether something is money or not is how readily you can use it to exchange value.
Okay. And I would contrast that. If you have any group willing to transact in the item, why is it not money? If there is a group of individuals willing to transact in that item, element, thing.
So if you have a willing market to accept this, then you'd call it money at that point. Is that a fair statement?
It's a transactional component that gets you something else that's not the same as it itself.
Okay. So would you apply that definition to any commodity? Would you say that any commodity could be money if the setting is such that people will accept it as payment? Okay.
No.
No?
Like grain isn't a good store of value. It goes bad and rots.
Okay. Has grain been used as money ever?
Yes.
Probably, yeah.
Right. Okay. So if we draw a circle and say commodities, and we say everything that's a commodity could okay, however you want to do it, could conceivably be money, is there anything outside that commodity bubble that is also money? Is there something that is money but is definitely not a commodity?
Yes.
Contracts,
Data.
I mean, if dollar is not a commodity, like, well, what are you going to do?
contract.
Okay, a dollar is not a commodity, but it is also money. Okay, so keep that in your head as we go forward. We're going to ask some more questions. So the question is, when is a commodity just a commodity, and when is a commodity money? And part of the answer to that is that we have kind of some sloppy definitions about what is money. And that's mostly due to the field of economics, I think, because we've really been taught a lot of different theories. And so there are a lot of different things that are called money. Let's go for a minute to the functions of money. And if any of you have read economics books or anything else, there's probably three sort of commonly cited functions of money. And I'll just show you what those are. The first primary one is that most people talk about as the medium of exchange. And I heard some people talk about that. That's one of the things we'd like to see Bitcoin and company maybe be a little more readily usable as a medium of exchange. Store of value, everybody understands what that is. I want to hold on to this thing, and in 5 years when I come back, I want my purchasing power to still be there, and I still want to be able to use that for something. And number 3 is a unit of account. So right now, most of our brains are kind of hardwired around the dollar. And when you look at something, you're probably comfortable thinking about that in terms of dollars because that's kind of the unit of account that we've become accustomed to. You guys are probably as big of enthusiasts about Bitcoin as anybody because you took the time to come out here tonight to a Bitcoin meeting. How many of you, when you look at a car, think about how many Bitcoins that's worth? Okay, so even the hardcore people that have really gotten into the Bitcoin sphere are not using Bitcoin as a unit of account today, at least at the moment. All right, so let's go into these features for just a minute. What is it that makes something a medium of exchange? Now, I'm just going to put some of my ideas up there, and there are other possible opinions, there are other possible things, but these are some of the things that I think. It needs to be widely accepted. We talked about money being something where there's a willing group of people who are willing to accept this. And into the modern economy, it needs to be digitally transmissible. And this is one of the reasons why coins and cash and things like that are falling out of favor. Things that 50 years ago were the predominant medium of exchange no longer are viable. Economically neutral is one that we don't think about a lot in the crypto world. We think, gee, why isn't Bitcoin a great medium of exchange? We can go into that one a little bit more. Stable and non-volatile is very much related to that. Let's go to function 2. What does it take to be a good store of value? So we talked about how wheat is not a great store of value because it's not durable. It's going to perish over time if we're not careful with it. secure. I'd like to be able to kind of hang on to this. I don't want it being stolen. I don't want it being lost. Insurable is a way that we protect that in a modern market. And we definitely don't want it to depreciate. And if it can appreciate, that could be even better. Okay? So let's go on to function number 3. What does it take to be a good unit of account? Now, say it again. Divisible. Divisible, okay. That's a good one. What else? I don't have that one on here. I think divisibility, in my mind, might apply more to a medium of exchange than a unit of measure, because if we did measure our value in oxen, that was one of the old units of measure, that's probably a couple of $1,000s worth. It could still be oxen, but as long as we have money denominated in 1,000th of an ox or something, as long as the medium of exchange is divisible, we can probably still use an ounce of gold or an ox or something of that value if we wanted to. Universal is one of the ones I picked. Okay, if you're going to have something that you're measuring this by, when it's the king's foot that we're measuring something, that's not quite as good as a meter, or something, an angstrom, something that we've picked out of nature, something that people can relate to and maybe is a little bit broader based. Commodity based I put up there because we all know gold. We all understand silver. We understand some of these things, whereas fiat currency is not very stable today because primarily that it's not commodity based. So now what I want you to do is I want you to think about these 3 functions. And I want you to look at 3 of the different forms of money that we talked about up here. And I'd like you to take a stab on a scale of 1 to 10. Tell me how good of a medium of exchange gold, Bitcoin, and dollar is. Okay, just shout out some numbers here. Medium of exchange for gold.
3.
Okay. Bitcoin.
8.
8. Dollar.
10.
Okay. The guy that said 8, how many of your transactions in the last week have you bought with Bitcoin?
Last week, 0.
Okay. Last month.
I'm a hodler.
As a percentage of your transactions in the last year, what percentage have you used Bitcoin as opposed to your credit card?
It's very small.
Very small, okay. Anybody else have a different opinion for this category? 2.
But you're talking frequency.
I'm talking about utility as a medium of exchange.
Are you able to
Just
use
because
your
You're
Bitcoin?
able to, but
But-
do use a different.
Yeah, I agree. They're 2 separate.
Okay. Do you?
High medium exchange, but low frequency.
Okay. So if you could, but you don't, think about that. Think about why maybe you don't.
Get rid of things that are inflating before you get things that are going to go up.
Okay. Okay, let's go on to store of value. How good of a store of value is gold?
9.
9, 10s, Bitcoin.
Also,
Pretty high.
10.
I think it's a 10, yeah.
How about the dollar?
2,
Ah,
0.
right now.
Yeah.
Relative to other dollars.
0.
Inflation.
It's negative.
Okay, let's go to unit of account. When I look at something, do I think of it, or could I reasonably think of it in terms of these units? How would gold be at pricing things?
2.
2.
Okay.
3.
How about Bitcoin?
9.
10, yeah.
Okay, so you'd like to value everything around you in terms of how many Bitcoins it's worth. Is that what I'm hearing? Okay. How about dollar? 10? Okay. So some differences of opinion here. I'll just show you my scores, and everybody has a little bit different take on this. And here's what I put here. In terms of store of value, in my view, Bitcoin is either a 9 or it's a 1. And it kind of depends on when I bought and when I sold. So if I bought on the way up and sold at the top, it's great. If I was stupid and and did the other function, then I actually had the potential of losing value.
You're not storing it, so.
What was it?
I said if you're selling it, you're not storing it.
Exactly.
But for a store of value, it shouldn't matter when you're acquiring the Bitcoin. It should just be.
Yes.
You're describing
My main
volatility.
point is that if it's volatile,
Then it's
it's going to be either really good or really bad depending on my timing.
Not necessarily there for you, which is
so
the
you have an upside
measure of
down,
a store,
also a
right?
downside, so it's
Yep.
not.
Now, what I said here is I said gold is a great unit of account because today, if I buy a suit in using gold, it costs about the same as it did 2,000 years ago. You know, it's kind of not a bad standard. It's been one of the best standards of money throughout time. In fact, I think that's probably, and I think that's probably why it has lasted and why Bitcoin was designed after gold, is because there are a lot of desirable things about gold. But I didn't put it, I put it low as a unit account for Bitcoin because of the volatility. If I were to price a car, if I had a car lot and I was to mark the price of the car in Bitcoin in a volatile market, I'd be out there every day erasing that price and putting a new price because it's going to be different.
Not if it was digital, you could just have it and it would just change immediately.
There you go.
But
It would still be changing.
Change.
Okay,
Like,
still be
The
changing.
other
That's a
one
good idea.
that's on there that I see a lot is like portability. I think that's
Yeah.
important because gold, the main reason fiat started was because it was a pain in the ass to move tons of gold.
So there's a reason why I've done this up here, is that I want to point out that this is not the area that my chips is going for. There are already viable things out there. This area and this area is where my chips is going for, to try to be strong. And so what we're going to do with my chips is a couple of things. We're going to make something that works very well as a digital medium of exchange. It is going to be good as a unit of account because it's going to be designed from the ground up to be flat and inert. It's not going to change value. We're going to try to design it in such a way that it doesn't move. And we're not going to go into a whole bunch of detail tonight about that, but during the Q&A, if you have questions about that, we can go into a little bit more detail. So I want to go through some of the design process with you and say, okay, if we're going to make something that's optimized for a medium of exchange, what features are we going to try to add in? This is a little bit of a duplicate of a slide that we looked at, but we want to make sure that this is something that is widely accepted. So it has to be easy to accept, has to be easy to adopt, has to be something that feels like Venmo or PayPal to the end user, and it needs to be something that everybody can get connected to, no matter what economic situation they're in, and can bring this up and can make it work. It needs to be easy to use. Infinitely scalable is a big one, because if we're going to put 9 billion people on this or more, it needs to be able to expand to that level. It needs to be stable. We talked about that. We don't want inflation or deflation around the valuation of this. We'd like it to be flat. Now, the reason, I alluded to this a little bit earlier, the reason is when you're buying something, there's a buyer and a seller. Somebody's selling, somebody's buying. And the person who's buying is going to be giving consideration. They're going to be paying. And the other person is going to be receiving whatever that money is. And when we have a form of money that is going up in value, the guy with the money would rather hang on to it. The guy that's receiving would like to obtain it, but the other guy's not going to want to giving it. And when the value of that money is going down in a rapid fashion, the guy that's buying wants to give it away all day long. He wants to get rid of it, but the guy who's receiving it doesn't want it. So in terms of a medium of exchange, the optimal value is just to be flat. Now, the thing we're buying with that medium of exchange is the thing we want to be speculating on. I want to buy an investment because I think it's going to go up. I think land's going up. I think Bitcoin's going up. I think hog bellies are going up or go down or whatever. That's where I'm going to use my smarts, is to think in terms of what investments am I going to buy. But the thing that I use to buy it would ideally be neutral for buyer and seller, so that it will just get out of the way just be neutral and just facilitate the transaction so that these two buyers and sellers can think about the commodity that they're buying and selling and not have to factor in this moving target in the medium of exchange itself. Okay? So in order to be fully scalable, we're going to find that we need to be fully distributed. And our dollar system is fully centralized. Bitcoin has gone a huge distance to teach us about decentralized control and decentralized management of data. But there are still certain aspects of Bitcoin/blockchain that are not fully distributed. They're decentralized, but they're not fully decentralized or distributed. So that's a big one.
What is it that's not decentralized enough, in your opinion?
Well, I don't want to get into disparaging Bitcoin here, but there is a single pool of issue, and there is one database. Now, there are multiple copies of the database, but every transaction has to kind of go through a consensus method. Now, there are more decentralized blockchain technologies, as you know, that are coming out in order to solve that problem. But the title of this is Taking Crypto to the Limit, and when we get to the end, I'm going to hopefully show you how we've taken those things that are decentralized and we've decentralized them down to the lowest logical level. And we'll get to that over time. Yes?
What are you keeping stable if my chips isn't Bitcoin?
So let me do that in the question and answer period, okay? Because that's a big diversion for us. So remember that and bring it back up. Okay, so we talked about goals for a medium of exchange. Now I want to talk about tactics. How are we going to actually do this? And I think some of this is going to answer your question, but there's a lot more I want to go into in the Q&A. In order to be a medium of exchange, we are going to have to store value, at least in the short term. So this is going to be like a battery that holds value. There's got to be something that is of value. And we know from economics and from accounting that there are two different ways to store value. Does anybody know what the accounting equation is? Any of you accountants out there in the crowd?
Liabilities.
Okay. Equals equity plus liabilities. May have gotten that backwards. Liabilities plus equity equals assets. So value can be represented by two different notions, equity and liability. Another way to say that is ownership of a commodity or a thing is kind of in this equity category. Liabilities are credit or debt. So the way we express that in monetary theory terms is we say there are two different kinds of money. There's equity money and there's credit money. Now, most of the time you hear commodity money and credit money, but I now call it equity money because it has two different things in it. It has commodities, gold and salt, and then it has digital commodities, which we've created just really in the last decade. And so we're going to kind of generalize that out and say there are things that you can own, and we're going to call that equity money, and then there are more contract-based things that you can store value in. And up here is the dollar and the euro, sort of anything that's issued from a central bank is primarily a credit instrument. There are also all kinds of private credit that have existed and exist in the world, and that's something that not a lot of people are that familiar with. And so we have kind of these two basic categories. So the question is, when we design our currency, what approach are we going to take? And the designers of Bitcoin said, we love gold. We think gold's great. We're going to make digital gold. So they made a choice early on, and that sort of forked their progress into a certain direction. Any of you mathematicians here? Who's familiar with non-Euclidean geometry? Okay, so Euclidean geometry, we take a set of assumptions that are very intuitive, and we end up with a geometry, a way to do math. In non-Euclidean geometry, we take some initial axioms that are not very intuitive, that may not make sense to us, and we end up in an entirely different place. And guess what? Both of those geometries are valuable and useful, and both of them actually describe truths about the universe and are things that we can use. And so what we're going to do with my chips is we're going to take you down a little bit different road, which is instead of making digital gold, we're going to make digital contracts, digital contract or credit money. Now I want to introduce something to you. How many of you who have not learned it from me already know what this is? Okay, where have you learned about the split tally?
That's something
Joseph told you. Okay, so that came from me. Anybody else know what this is?
You showed it to us. I'm saying.
Okay, so this is called a split tally. It's a tally stick. This is a form of private credit that everybody would have known exactly what it was 200 years ago. This is very common, but it's been forgotten. Why has it been forgotten? Well, this was a form of payment, and I'll tell you about it. This long part is called the stock, and this short part is called the foil, and they go together, and they would cut notches in the stick to kind of tell how much it was worth, how much they were going to pay with this form of money. And then they would split it down the middle so that there was a receipt that I could keep. And then if I was going to buy something from you, I would give you the stock, which you would hold, and you would become the stockholder. And that's why we have the term stockholder today, is because of this artifact. And I would say, darn, I got the short end of the stick. I am the guy who is the debtor. And that's where we have the term short end of the stick. And this was in use from about the 1100s. I thought it was the 1200s, but it goes all the way back to 1100s up till about 1834. And they had a little bit different kind of form of this. And then it was kind of taken out of use and replaced with central bank paper money, specifically the Bank of England. And they took these old tally sticks out of use. Well, what do we learn from the tally stick? There's some important things that we can learn from it. One is that that money can be created by me, you. How many of you get angry that banks create money out of nothing? How many of you heard that out there, said that it's not fair, banks create money out of nothing? Well, guess what? I've got some news for you. Banks do not create money out of nothing. What do they create money out of?
Money. Contracts.
Contracts with who? With you. Banks create money out of you. And if there's one thing I want you to take away, it's that the money supply gets created by leveraging you. So yes, banks create money out of you, and guess what? You can short circuit that and you can create your own money. And you do it every time you create an IOU. That's what this is. Now, what are some of the problems? Let's talk about features and problems associated with private money, because there are good reasons why it's not been widely used. All right, now it has some really cool pros. Credit money is more easily digitized than commodity money. This is the whole problem that Bitcoin was up against. We're going to make digital gold. How do we digitize gold? And so we had to come up with this idea of creating coins that were unique. Well, credit money is just a contract. That's easy to digitize. We do it all day long. We can do digital contracts back and forth, and we can document those. Perfect elasticity, which I won't go into a huge amount of detail on, but in essence, when you issue an IOU in connection with a purchase, you're creating new money out of yourself, not out of nothing, but out of your goodwill of yourself and the trust the other party has with you. And you're creating it in the exact instant that these new commodities come into the marketplace. And so the money supply will exactly mirror the economy and will go up and down in exact proportion. This is one of the secrets to why my chips is going to be non-inflationary, non-deflationary, is because it is exactly elastic at the microscopic level. With private credit money, it's very private. You have a contract with one other person, and you're the only two people in the world who know about it, and so privacy is enhanced. Very secure, egalitarian, meaning anybody can do it. As long as somebody in the world trusts you, you can issue a private credit contract. It's very accountable. If you trust somebody who's not trustworthy, you're the one that's going to get burned. And if the other person burns you and ends up with a lawsuit against them or something else, that fraudulent activity or negligent activity is going to be dealt with right there. And so it's very accountable. It's trust enhancing. So you need to learn to trust people, and those people need to learn to be trustworthy, because if you're not trustworthy, that relationship is going to be severed, and they're going to lose access to markets. Big cons, and this is the reason why this has not been used and why this is not mainstream in our society today, is because it is not fungible. If I issue an IOU to you for services and you want to go buy something else with that, that person may not trust me the same way that you trusted me.
Would you consider the banking industry's credit and debt systems fungible?
So what happens in the central banking industry is the government grants a monopoly to a single issuer of credit. So that single issuer of credit says, I have Federal Reserve notes, which I will put into circulation. You go to the bank, hat in hand, and say, I will execute a private mortgage with you, bank, if you will give to me this super fungible public credit instrument, and then I can go around anywhere that's recognized around the world with this public instrument. And the backing behind the dollar, this is also another fallacy, the dollar is backed, part of the dollars are backed. The dollars are backed by these private mortgages and commercial loans that were issued to the banks in order to create the money. Now there's a whole bunch of money that is issued today without backing. Okay, and that's primarily based on government printing, government borrowing, unsecured borrowing of money. That money is unbacked. But the money that you and I create whenever we get a home mortgage is definitely backed. And if we default, they're coming for your house. They're definitely going to collect that collateral. So some of the money is backed, some of the money is not backed, and that's something that we don't always understand. So I'm not sure if that answered your question. Let's go to the trust dilemma. So we have two choices if we're going to go down this private credit road. Is we either need to centralize, and we need to have kind of this monopoly that is the issuer and certifier of all credit, or we're going to say we're going to put all of these privately issued credits into a pool, and we're going to hope that people don't cheat. Okay, well that's kind of where stablecoin is, and there are all kinds of mechanisms to try to make sure that the backed coins that are going in are actually backed. But it is a mutual credit system. You're all kind of in the same boat. This one right here is called the Hudson Valley Current. Maybe I think you've probably researched that one. This is a form of mutual credit money, and everybody kind of backs their own little piece of the pie. But the problem is if somebody defaults, that is expressed as inflation across the entire pool. So how are we going to deal with this in my chips? Because we don't want to centralize, and we don't want to be subject to inflation. So we're going to have a digital tally. We're going to start out by designing something that is modeled after the split tally, but is going to be digital, and it's going to be a digital contract. You could think of it as a smart contract if you want, but it's not really a smart contract because it's not going to live on a public blockchain. It's going to live on a very private chain that you just have with your trading partner, and you're going to be the only two parties to this database. So now I want you to imagine this case where we have an employee here working for a manufacturing company, and she's going to get paid on a private tally. And she's going to get paid in IOUs, just like you would imagine with a split tally stick. And the manufacturer is creating goods that are being sold to a wholesaler, And that payment chain is happening on a private tally. IOUs flowing in the direction of the arrows. And we have the little chip symbol here to show you that they're paying in chips. So as they buy their goods and services, they're saying IOU, and that's the money that's flowing. And then finally, we have a retailer here who's buying from the wholesaler. So money is flowing in this direction. Now, if we were in a mutual credit situation where all the money kind of goes into a common pool, the normal thing you would expect is for the employee to take some of her money and say, okay, I'm going to go over to the store and I'm going to buy something. And this is the normal kind of circular flow that we see expressed in the dollar market and in any mutual credit market, is that these dollars are flowing in circles around the economy. What we're going to do with my chips is we're going to solve the fungibility problem by saying we're not going to be fungible. We're throwing fungibility out the window. In fact, we're going to make it so tight that when I issue this tally to you, I'm going to say this is issued to you and only you and is of no value to anybody else in the system. It is payable by me to the receiver. So we're going to put this tally very local here. That's a really interesting security feature because now my tallies can't be stolen. This value can't be stolen because it has a digital identity attached to it. It is payable by one digital entity to another digital entity and is absolutely of no value to anybody else on the planet. It's a personalized token of money. And now we're going to issue a new kind of payment system that we're going to do digitally, and I'm just going to explain how the algorithm works basically. Is this person's server is going to say to this person's server, I would like to send 10 chips to that retailer over there. And will you transact this for me? And in a Ripple-like format transaction, his server is going to say, yes, I very much would like to do that. And he's going to propagate that request to this server. And he's going to say, I know exactly where that's going. I know how to transact that. And he's going to send it to this server. Now, I won't go in right now into the cryptographic details of how we can do that securely. But it's a distributed network protocol that is able to be both live and secure so that we know that it's either succeeded or failed with certainty after a set amount of time. And so that money is going to flow uphill. Instead of flowing in a circle, it's going to flow back uphill. And by uphill, we mean in the opposite direction that the original payments occurred in. And it's going to subtract value from this person's wallet, and it's going to add value to that person's wallet. And nobody in this circuit is going to have accepted a token from anybody that they don't trust inherently. So the tokens will just go back and forth on each of these segments individually. And yet, in the same way as AC current can flow through a capacitor, for those of you who understand this from an electrical analogy. And we're going to put alternating currency back through this channel, and it's going to flow across insulative gaps, and it's going to flow wherever we want through the network. Now, what's great about this is why would this server want to participate? Okay, in a blockchain network, we have transaction fees. Well, we don't need transaction fees anymore because what's happening is this person has assets over here, which are IOUs from this person, but he doesn't buy stuff from him. He has this asset, but he can't use it for anything. He has a liability over here, a promise to pay. What he'd really like to do is take some of his assets and use them to dispense with some of his liabilities. And when this person needs that transaction, it not only helps her to buy what she needs from the grocery store, but it's actually going to pay this person's bills. It's going to reduce his assets and reduce his liabilities and balance out these imbalances that he has on his register. So this person has a natural economic incentive to participate in that transaction, as does everyone along the chain. Okay, so the money's going to transact. That's called a linear lift. Now, we can also do lifts in a circular fashion. And it looks like that's a little hard to see. but let's see if it will work. So this is just kind of a pre-canned okay, here it goes. So we're going to do the same algorithm in a circular fashion. And you can see that an IOU is a liability on this side, and it's an asset on this side. This is a real simple simulation that will just run 10 cycles, and then you'll see a reverse cycle in red. And what it does is it'll take the least common value around the circle, and it will reduce it. So right now we have a 0, that goes up to a 3, 14. So now you can see that now it's zeroed this segment. And in a real network, what happens is you can discover these loops, and you can discover loops in all different directions and all different angles. And so if you give it enough time, most of these credits can eventually be cleared and can clear back to 0. So we can do two things. We can send value through the network from point A to point B in order to make payments. And we can do circular functions in order to clear out balances. And so everybody involved in the circle is going to get their bills paid using the assets that they have elsewhere. Okay? Now, we've only got a couple more slides here, and then we'll get into question and answers. I wanted to tell you about the title for my talk tonight is Taking Crypto to the Limit. So I actually, a chatbot wrote this function for me. I said I wanted to express this idea. In the limit, as we take decentralization out to infinity, it becomes a distributed network. And so I want to show you what that looks like. So imagine a graph network. And I did this for Joseph. He was asking me about stable coins, okay? And I did some research on stable coins. Imagine a graph network where each node in the network is a person or a company. And each one of these edges in the network is a blockchain. And it's a private blockchain that only those two people can access. And on that blockchain are stablecoins, meaning collateral-backed coins that are asset-backed. And as an added bonus, by contract, these people have agreed that each of those separate blockchains are denominated in a unit that is nominally the same. Meaning if I accept 5 over on this chain, I'm willing to transmit 5 of equal value over onto this other chain. And that facilitates the transmission. So now we have a global network that it has literally 9 billion different digital currencies in it. And every one of them is valued nominally on the same unit of measure. And so they are built to transact and to flow value through these network nodes. And now we have an algorithm which digitally will find a pathway from you to anybody else in the network that you're connected to and be able to transmit that value. And all built on a unit of measure which is nominally stable. So this is the distributed lift algorithm. We had a BYU student do his master's degree, his master's dissertation on this, and in order to prove that it was cryptographically secure. There's been quite a lot of progress made on it. If you visit mychips.org, you'll be able to see his presentation for his master's, and you can learn a lot about the algorithm. Here is just basically the progress status, some of the things that have been completed, some of the things we have yet to complete. And with that, I'd like to open it up to questions, and maybe we can go into a little bit more detail about some of the other things that you may still be wondering about.
You said 9 billion different kinds of tokens.
By the way, that's an analogy.
Yeah.
That's an analogy to take, if your brain is wired for crypto, I want to help you take what you know and understand and figure out what I mean by taking it to the limit. Okay? We're not issuing coins we're not literally making stable coins, but it's very similar to that concept. So Yes.
And that's why I use the term blockchain, because this connection that I might have with somebody else doesn't necessarily need to be a blockchain, does it?
It does not need to be a blockchain because there are only two parties to it.
Okay, that is like a channel.
So it's a communication channel, but there is a consensus algorithm that operates across this because we do want to make sure that we have the same copy of the ledger between the two of us, or at least we approach sameness in that ledger.
And wouldn't it be, so it'd be like, kind of as an analogy, one token per channel. And so since I'm connected with hundreds of people or companies, that would be like that many exponential tokens, right?
You could be connected with as few as one. So you could be connected to your employer and no one else, and you could still operate in this economy because your employer could pay you, and then you could linearly lift those tokens back out to wherever else it is that you want to be connected. I will say that while MyChips is optimized to be a medium of exchange and a unit of measure, it is not optimized for long-term storage, because your employer could go out of business. And so you don't want to keep your life savings in that tally. So instead of having one tally, if you had a tally with your employer and you had a tally with your home mortgage, that's a powerful combination, because now you can lift all of your excess value into your mortgage and you can store value in the equity in your home. And now you're using a physical asset in order to store long-term value. You could lift it into your crypto fund if you really wanted to store your long-term value in Bitcoin, for example. And that's how this becomes a complement to cryptocurrency, is because you can use this one now as your medium of exchange, and you can use the crypto asset, which has actually become a better investment than it has become a medium of exchange, and you can use that for what it is good at.
Just to clarify your final point, I don't have to actually be connected to people to pay you.
Right.
In fact, they don't even have to know who I am.
Oh.
You could literally pay for a transaction. Nobody in the middle even knows your identity or your address, and even the party that you're paying, you have to know their address, but they don't have to know your address.
Wow. Cool.
So let's go. Let's go here first, and then up here. So
Could you explain a little bit more the off-ramps and on-ramps? Like you said, storing MyChips in your mortgage or your crypto.
So
How does that work?
if you have, and this is a derivative service that we'd like to develop soon after we get the technology rolled out. If you can execute a mortgage, a loan, or a home equity line of credit denominated in chips, there's a node on the network that is your partner who's lent you that money. And you're connected to them by a tally, and they're connected all over elsewhere in the internet. And the algorithm can find a pathway. So if this is you, and this is your mortgage, and this is your employer, you'll actually send those chips back through your employer, out through the network, until they find their way back to your mortgage. And literally, your home equity line of credit will get paid down by whatever amount you've transferred. And so you're storing that value literally in your house. Now, if you get your house paid off, it's time to go buy a car on loan, or buy a commercial rental on loan, or to do something else. And now you can store value in assets that are well suited for long-term storage. I don't know if that answers your question. Okay, let's go up here.
Going on to that, so would one of those nodes have to be someone that's willing to give someone else fiat for this currency?
If you want to pay with chips and transmit that to someone who only accepts fiat currency, then yes. If you have a chip mortgage, it's going to just work. If you have a dollar mortgage, then you would need someone in the network somewhere who is trying to buy chips and sell dollars. Now that's a derivative market that will evolve in a mature market. Somebody will always be selling something that there's a demand for, and somebody will always be buying something that they want to buy. So if you have buyers and sellers of dollars, then you'll be able to do that. Now, will that incur a fee? If you're going up the economic hill, it will incur a fee, and if you're going down the economic hill, it will earn a fee. And so
I don't know if I followed something you said earlier about a branch of like the existing system is built on equity, and this one, maybe I'm interpreting it wrong, but now I'm imagining, and this one is built on liability. Is that what you were saying?
yes. So let's talk about that for a minute. Well,
I guess I'm just conjecturing on that then. So like the asset or the equity system would be, I have gold, I'm going to represent that with this money. The liability would be like the tokens per se that you would transact with other people are only created with IOUs.
yes.
So like the only way that there is value in the system is if someone owes someone else.
Yeah. So when we say tokens with my chips, I want you to take that term loosely, because it doesn't mean the same thing as a token on a blockchain. A token on a blockchain is a unique number that is assigned to you to be the owner of that number. When we talk about tokens on a MyChips chain, we're really talking about a contract with a ledger, and we just put a number in there, and I digitally sign it and say, I owe you this much. And we add it to the bottom of the ledger, and it's literally a chain. It's a chain of blocks of transactions, and they're chained in very much the same way as on a public blockchain, but they're smaller, and they have
The idea
less
is the
information.
unit of account would be transferable. Like everyone's using the same measure of.
So when you sign a MyChips tally, one of the things that's in this contract that you sign says we're delineating our contract in chips. And so as long as I do that, and I'm a node in the middle of one of these clearing functions, and I accept chips over here, I want to make darn sure that I've executed that contract the same, so that I can transact those, and they make it all the way to the other end still in chips. And as long as that transaction makes it to the other end and it has the intended amount, then the transaction has the ability to fire and commit.
But what I mean is like the unit, you would want to know how much you're getting paid if you were working for like a business, right? So you would want to know that you could go buy the groceries that you need based on this number of chips, right? So
Correct.
those numbers are all measured. That's the stable.
Yep. So I haven't gone into a lot of detail about how the chip is measured. Let me bring up one quick additional comment to you, and then I'm going to come over here, and then if we still want to know about how chips are measured, we'll go into that. How many of you would agree that this is my phone? You all okay to support me in that? What if most of you in this room disagreed with that and decided this was not going to be my phone anymore? It's not going to be my phone anymore for long. Is that correct? So this is an equity concept. This is an equity concept. Here's a token. Here's a thing. I own it. In order for me to own it, I require public consensus. And this is the reason why when we're dealing with Bitcoin, we need to have a public blockchain, because there needs to be consensus in the community about who owns that token at any given moment. That's what public blockchain is all about, is establishing ownership of tokens. In a private credit arrangement, it's very much different. If I say to you, I owe you $10, what do all the rest of you have to do with that? Nothing. So I don't need a public blockchain in order to establish a private credit contract. So what it allows us to do is, instead of having one big database that everybody in the public attests to and sees, we're able now to break that up into 9 billion separate databases. And that's what helps us make that jump. So I promise to come over here next, and then we'll keep going.
Wondering, without any kind of public accountability or anything, could, in your other example, the employer and the worker, could the employer say, you know what, I value you so much, I'm going to pay you $10 billion. And now she has that value sitting there that she could go to the store and clean them out or buy the store.
Yep.
Like, suddenly she's super rich, and no one knows how that came to be.
This is the quintessential question, okay? So in your scenario, these two are kind of colluding to fool the system, all right? So he gives her 10 billion chips, and now she wants to go spend it somewhere. How's that going to happen? She's going to send to here and say, I will give you 10 billion if you will send it on. This guy goes to this computer and says, I will give you 10 billion. What's he going to say? For no. I don't owe you 10 billion. I'm not going to give you 10 billion.
Anybody else? I don't need them.
So here's what you do. This is a valid question because I glossed over this. So let's tell you how this works. When you execute a digital tally, there are several things that you're going to put into that tally. One is, am I extending credit to you at all? Because this is going to go in two different directions. First question is, am I trusting you at all? Or do I trust you zero? And I can say zero. You can put that in on the tally if you want. And the other question is, are you trusting me? Now, if it's zero in both directions, that's not a tally. But if it's non-zero in at least one direction, that's a functional tally, and we can do business over that. As long as an IOU can travel in at least one direction, we can work with it. Now, if it's not zero, we're going to say it's 10, or it's 100, or it's however much we trust. Now, how many of you here work for 2 weeks at a time before you get your paycheck? Okay, pretty much everybody. So what I'm telling you is that you inherently trust your employer for that economic amount. You're willing to work on the come for about 2 weeks. So let's say that's 1/25th of your yearly salary. Put that in a number, do that in your head and say, this is how much I've decided I inherently trust my employer. Now, if you went in after 2 weeks and your employer said, sorry, I can't pay you this time, but if you work for another 2 weeks, for sure I'll get you next time around. So now we're saying, okay, 1/12. Do I trust my employer for 1/12? Some of you would keep working for that other 2 weeks. Some of you would be dusting off the resume at that point and trying to figure out. So your trust in your employer is quantifiable. It's not zero. It's more than zero, but it's not infinite. You're not going to go on forever with that trust. So we quantify this amount, and as long as this tally is quantified for less than that, it's just not going to work. It doesn't matter how much I issue here, it's not going anywhere. And this is the big difference between private mesh credit, which is what we'll call this, and mutual credit. If we defraud the system by issuing false credits into the pool, and we expect those credits to travel this direction, we can now defraud the system in exactly that way. But by flowing uphill with the lift algorithm, we're able to stop that in the bud.
Yes. So is anyone now able to issue more chips than they have equity?
That's up to the private relationship. So if you and I do a tally, it's up to you to decide how much you trust me. And if you don't trust me, I could offer collateral. I could give you a trust deed on my house. I could give you the title to my car. I could give you, rights to my gold in my vault. I can back it with really any commodity under the sun. And we're able to do that in a contract that is part of the tally. Okay, so it's up to individuals. It's distributed out, and the individuals decide what degree of trust they're going to have. So here's the app. Here's the mobile app. I've got some chips showing in there, and I'm going to pick one of my tallies, and I'm going to ask it to show me my contract. Now this is really small, so you probably can't see that, but it's a little PDF document in there. And if I scroll down to the bottom, it's got digital signatures on it, and I can read it.
So every tally has, it's like legal document.
It has a legal document baked in.
Let's say if I went to McDonald's and wanted to buy a burger, I'd have to then instead go through the drive-thru and just hand them a card, or you'd have to digitally sign it.
So are you talking about in a mature network where they honor chips?
Sure.
Is that your scenario? So you would either go through the window, or you would look on their website, and they would have a QR code, and you would scan it, and you'd put in this many chips, and it would come up on their register.
So to some degree, the contract is auto-generated.
So the contract does not exist here.
Right, the contract you just showed us, the PDF form.
So this is McDonald's, this is the buyer. There is no contractual relationship between the buyer and McDonald's in this scenario. The money flows up here and down through the company that sells potatoes to McDonald's. So when you pay for your McDonald's Happy Meal, McDonald's is receiving a credit from the potato supplier.
But it could though, your circular one, you showed us the slide after this, actually be this with that second loop.
So there's nothing to say that you can't execute a tally with McDonald's. I'm just answering the question that I think was posed. So let's talk about that. So McDonald's says, hey, scan this other QR code and you can execute a tally with us.
You'll be part of our rewards program.
Exactly. So you say, right on.
Is that kind of like I'll buy a hamburger today and pay you on Tuesday?
Well, here's what would happen.
For those who know that movie.
Here's what would happen. If McDonald's posts a QR code out there that says anybody can sign up for our tally, how much trust are they going to bake into that tally? Okay, probably zero. I don't know, maybe $10 or something. Maybe they're willing to risk a little bit, but basically they're going to say zero. But when you execute the tally with McDonald's, you're going to say, how often do I eat at McDonald's? I eat there once a month, so I'm going to collect, 20, 30 chips on my tally. And you bake that in. And you say, I'd just kind of like to always have 30 chips on my McDonald's tally, so that whenever I go into McDonald's, boom, I'm a preferred customer, and I can execute that. Once you do that, these circular lifts will kick in automatically, transparently, behind the scenes, and on your app, there'll be a McDonald's tally, and over time, you'll see your chips will accumulate, and they'll come from here. So in the background, your employer chips will find their way over to your McDonald's tally. And what does this do for you? What does it do for McDonald's? Well, it's like you lending money to McDonald's. It's like you collecting a gift certificate for McDonald's. It's going to lower their total working capital requirements for what they need to run their business. They're going to like that. So they're going to want to give you an incentive to collect McDonald's chips, and likely in a mature market, that's going to come in the form of a discount. So if you pay them through this channel, you're probably going to pay par. If you pay them on a private tally, you're probably going to get a discount, because they're going to like people collecting their chips. Yeah, did I get your question? Yeah. Okay, let's go here next.
I'm still formulating it.
Okay.
Yeah. Why not build this on top of Bitcoin, or build a layer 2 on top of Bitcoin, or use Lightning Network or something, rather than start from ground zero?
Because it is lighter and more scalable to not use a public blockchain for these contracts. It's more scalable if the contracts only have to exist where they have to exist. So that's the primary reason. Secondary reason is that my chips is written from the ground up with as few dependencies as possible, so that you can go to a village in Nepal, you can light this up, they can do commerce in their village. They don't need AWS, they don't need DNS, they don't need certificates, they don't need anything. It's self-maintaining, and so it's meant to have as few of these dependencies as possible.
It just needs a network, not necessarily the internet.
That's correct. You could create your own private network, and you could operate within the sphere of that network. Now, if you get an interconnection to another private network, now you can transact. But this could be 100,000 individual small networks, or it could be one large worldwide network.
Cool. So essentially, the app is my server.
In the current implementation, the app is not your server. It's actually a two-part kind of an affair. There are a couple of reasons for that. One is that your server, it would be in your advantage for your server to be on all the time, so that it can take part in these transactions that are going on. And unless you want to have your phone actively transacting business and on 24/7, it's going to be more efficient for you to have a little Linux droplet out in the world somewhere that's transacting your business. The other thing is that you do have to have an address. You have to have an IP address where things can be sent. It's not a public, it is public IP, but it's not a published IP. So the only people typically that will know your IP number are the people that you share direct tallies with. But you do need to have a public IP number somewhere. That can be done on a phone, but it's going to be a little bit of a challenge. There's some efforts in the works to make a phone-based node for this. So it's probably possible. Yeah.
What are your what's the theoretical latency? Like if I want to go pay for a burger, how soon is...
So Nate has done some modeling on that, so I might ask him to it's all guesstimates at this point, but he can tell you a little bit with 9 billion nodes what the degrees of separation.
Because on central exchanges today, it can take upwards of minutes to see that value move. Right?
I will say that this is going to be not as reliable. You can if the seller and buyer are both on Bitcoin, you're always going to be able to make a connection, but time is going to be the issue. With my chips, in the early stages, there will be certain people that you just can't pay. You're just not connected to that person. So it's either going to succeed or it's going to fail. If it succeeds, maybe you can...
Yeah, I mean, one thing that will determine that, in either case, it should be tens of milliseconds.
So faster than Visa currently.
I mean, it's essentially, the TCP/IP thing, that this is a TCP/IP of value, isn't that far off, because it's a lot of the same type of searching that you're doing to search, and then with caching and things, that's where there's some unknowns. How it depends on how well known you are and your connections are, things like that. But I mean, you should know one way or the other in a matter of milliseconds. There's some things that can speed that up. If I'm trying to pay you, I said earlier, you don't have to know who I am. But if you're willing to share your address, your actual physical address, then potentially you can actually start the search both directions, and then you get a much slower fan out, and you're actually finding connections even faster. So there's some things that can optimize it. But even with a one direction traversal in a 9 billion entity world, it should all still be very doable.
In that context, people use Venmo all the time right now. So it's like, hey, scan my thing, pay me, and then they wait and they go, okay, we're good. So is it going to be faster than that? Or equal to that?
Yeah, I mean, in that case, they have centralized servers and everything. So in this case, it's actually a series of hops that has to take place.
Longer or shorter?
I mean, potentially it should be milliseconds. It should be sub-second. Is my intuition.
But the downside
is the 9 billion people in the world.
Venmo takes 3 to 5 seconds now.
Yeah, the downside is that in an immature network, the answer might be no. In a mature network, it will almost always be yes.
I think some of the early things that need to be developed for this are gateways, so that you have somebody that will allow you to pay at every point of sale. If we can develop some gateways, so I can use my chips as a real-time pay for something, even though they don't directly have a chips account. Although the nice thing is that there's an incentive immediately for people to start accepting chips. There's a financial incentive. But if they don't have a financial incentive, then ideally that we can handle through a payment gateway. But that's hopefully somebody enterprising. Unlike Bitcoin, where there's like speculative type money to be made, this is more like building these actual kinds of businesses, building gateways, building financial services, different kinds of things. Like a HELOC type loan product. These are all things that need to be built around my chips. there's a lot of opportunity for people to make money in this space. It's just different. You have to provide a real service.
Yeah, I'm going to come to you in 1 second. How many of you would like one of these? So I've got a box of them here, so whoever wants one, come and grab one. Let's go to your question.
So you said at the beginning it might not work in a mature network, it would, and you circled around a lot of like the setting up these gateways. What do you think, like your estimate of like number of users to really get traction? Because that's a big part of like even Bitcoin transactions. Like it's really hard to go and find someone to take it, right?
I'm focusing on a different strategic question than that. So the premise is that it won't work without a critical mass of users. I'm taking a different strategic approach. Is how can I manufacture an artificially small network that will be functional? And so I'm identifying a few key vendors to bring on board and a few key employers to bring on board to make a functional network where you could receive maybe 3% of your payroll every month in chips and know that you can spend it at these preferred vendors and get a discount. So that's the way I'm going to choose to kickstart this, is by just making it functional on day one with this select group of local vendors, and then you'll be able to use it right out of the gate. You'll just only use it where it works, and you'll get a discount, and so it'll be worth the hassle, and then we'll be able to organically grow that network out from that.
It was kind of like what Ripple's doing, just between banks, but you're doing it with across.
There's Ripple for the people. And we don't need XRP because we're each creating our own distributed currency. So we don't need a global kind of standard exchange. We don't need a coin because we have this nominal measure. Yeah.
So another answer to your question, because I like that question, because what I've seen is in the Web3 space, like almost a lot of these projects, it's like, oh, it won't work unless everybody everywhere does it. It's like you have to do it. Otherwise, there's no value. A lot of projects are like that. This one is nice because essentially, if you have like a small group of friends even, or a small network of businesses that work together, like in a chamber of commerce or something, it's just like, they don't even have to know that this is some global scheme. It'd just be like, oh, hey, chambers of commerce, look, you guys can now do business with amongst yourselves directly, and like, you've already started creating value in a small trusted group. And that's cool.
We have a number of people in our orbit who are trying to implement community currencies around the world, literally, all across the world. And everybody's struggling this. How can we go to a third world village and set up a self-sufficient community currency for this village? And so we've got lots of people ready to take this as soon as we can roll it out. And so adoption is not going to be the problem. The problems are going to be the technical issues of getting it hardened, getting it finished, getting the implementation done. And once we get that done, we have plenty of people who are interested in adopting it in these small communities. The big bonus for them is not only is it going to light up their local community, but they're going to have ways to now exchange value across different communities.
So I mentioned the Hudson dollar. Bring that back up. That's kind of...
Yeah. So these are motivated communities who are trying to do what we're doing. These guys want my chips. So, as cool as this is, nobody's using this in commerce. No, it's not being used. So, yeah.
Last question, I swear.
You can ask as many as you want. I'm here for as long as you guys want to.
I might have oversimplified this diagram, but I'm struggling to understand where the employee would have like a sufficient credit to pay the retailer if the retailer is going to make a profit. Because the chain from retailer to wholesaler would naturally be less, each step.
What do you mean that it would be less?
Like if I'm a profitable business, I'm going to owe less money than I'm taking in.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that this is going to have a larger balance on it than this one.
Yeah.
And so that means that if I'm sending my little small balances back up through, they should have no problem transacting through these larger channels. Is that your question?
I guess I'm just looking at like the retailer, like at McDonald's, let's say it costed them $5 to make a burger,
How are they going to make a profit?
and they like only made one burger.
So you understand that that's an orthogonal question to the payment system, right? That's, in other words, the profit that they make here has nothing to do with the form of payment. So that's just going to be a matter of how much they're going to charge.
They'll pay, they're gonna say, I owe you wholesaler 5 chips to give me, the raw.
Are you saying how are they going to collect all of this money through this channel?
Yes.
Because they want to make a profit?
They are gonna owe less to the wholesaler than the employee is gonna owe
So
to them.
give me an example of what this lady is going to do with her profit.
I guess that's what I'm trying to figure out. It's like, what's the minimum?
Okay, so all of her basis, I think I understand your question. So let's try to answer it. All of her cost basis is no problem, correct?
Right.
It's her profit. How's she going to spend her profit? So give me an example of a place she might spend her profit or save her profit.
To stakeholders, if it's a for-profit company, right? Like the owners of the business.
So she's got the same issue. She can have a chip mortgage, and she can lift that money into her chip mortgage and save it for her retirement, or she can spend it at the movie theater or at the restaurant or a travel agency. So profits are either saved or spent, and so they can be lifted. It can be lifted not only into her suppliers, but also into her personal expenditure chains.
So I think
Where
it's
she's gonna spend
shifting focus between I'm trying to save all this money to I'm trying to achieve an actual goal. I think that's what it's doing, right?
I guess what I'm trying to figure out, maybe I figured out, sorry, it wasn't a very clear question. The retailer needs sufficient connections back to the employee that are more than just the wholesaler. Like if she's gonna go spend it at another retailer, I guess what I'm getting at is all of these connections need to go back to the employee if the employee is gonna be able to cancel out like the full credit.
Yes, and the answer is different in an immature network than it is in a mature network. In an immature network, we'll answer the question by saying this is a small percentage of total sales because they're only doing 10% of their sales in chips and the rest is in dollars, and so they can accumulate their profits in dollars and they can focus their chips on their suppliers. In a mature network, it literally can take over and just become the ubiquitous form of money because she can spend it not only with her wholesaler but with her recreational expenditures.
Once it's systemic, there is no value that she would have unless it was.
She only needs one tally with one place that she wants to spend her money. So if she has her personal debit card account somewhere, you can lift money into that and she can call that her profit. So when you set up your tallies, you get to set the benchmarks of how much you're trying to store on that tally. You can set it high, you can set it low, put it to 0, put it to 1 million, wherever you want it to be. And as long as there's potential, those lifts will find their way into that tally or that wallet, and you'll begin to collect value there. And if that's the place you want to spend it, then you'll spend it out of there. If you want to save it, you'll save it there.
Can I just elaborate on that?
Yes, please.
Also keep in mind the circular lifts that are happening. So if the retailer, there's only so much credit that the retailer needs with each wholesaler that they have. So let's say they've exhausted that. They only buy 1,000 worth of or something from this particular wholesaler. But a lot of lifts are happening through this wholesaler, so they start to accumulate more credit there than they want to. Then, depending on the dials that Kyle's referring to, if that retailer says, no, I want to keep this at most around 1,000, transactions can still happen because that retailer wants maybe some of that value to go somewhere else. And so the lifts can pull that money from that wholesaler and the circular lifts can push it out other places, like a transfer.
I'm imagining that as all like zero trust.
So the trust has to exist across the tally, but it does not have to exist beyond the tally.
So for that to work, for McDonald's to get the full $10 and actually make a profit, they would need to credit the employee more than the value that was originally.
So imagine that she got back too much. more than she was going to spend with this guy. You with me? So she spent 8, and now she sent 10 back. Now I got positive 2. I got more than I need. Well, just lift it back through there and send it to the movie tickets. I can spend my profits out of this wallet just as though they were dollars. I can spend them with anybody who's connected to the network.
You can think of a circular lift like a transfer. I want to owe this person less. I want this person to owe me more. Whatever. So you have all these knobs, and I can move the money between all the people that owe me and I owe.
And by the way, each of these situations has a direct analogy to dollars. You know, we think it's this crazy new thing, but if I write a check, if I write a personal check to you and give you the check, it ain't going very far unless I have money in my account. It's the exact same thing. If I give you an IOU but I have no upstream assets, you're not going to be able to cash that check or lift that value. And that's why the 100 million chips here were not going anywhere, because it was a bad check. And it won't travel back through the system. So, I mean, this guy might be able to fool him for, you know, the 100 or whatever is on his tally. But there has to be money in the account in order for these promises to transact. And that's exactly the way it is with regular money. Who is it here? And then we'll come up here.
I had a quick question, because I've read some things on your site. Even though this isn't a token, this has an assigned value. I'm curious why that's a value other than 1.
So elaborate on that.
Like I think it said that you guys averaged like the cost of the human labor hour across the planet to give it a value. Given that this works in local community markets where everybody knows their cost of living, their exchange of value of goods, why give it a value other than 1?
1 what?
1 anything, just a
1 what? What would you suggest?
1 if you're going to do an exchange.
So you'd like to have it be $1?
1, just a unitary 1.
But it has to have units.
Start with, it just feels kind of inflationary to call it $4.50 or $8. It's more arbitrary, actually.
Yeah, okay. So if we just said it's 1, then we would be guilty of what the dollar is doing. So the dollar is a note. It's a note payable, but what is it payable of? This is a great question, by the way, and I want to answer this. This is a really good one, okay? I don't know how many of you can see this one, but this is a silver certificate. Okay, this is a modern $20 bill. So this is a note payable. This is a note payable. What is this payable in? It has a unitary 1, but what is it payable in? Silver. It's payable in silver. A certain amount of silver. I don't even remember what it was. Who remembers how much silver it was? I can't remember. But you could actually...
Originally and tied to an ounce, like way back.
Could be. Could have been an ounce of silver. I don't remember. So you could literally put this on the table and get an ounce of silver. It's a silver certificate. This is identical in every way, except what is the unit of measure? It's worth 20. 20 what? And there is an answer to this, by the way. Who knows what it is? It's $20.
$20 of the distributed dollar bills.
Your $20 is a note payable for $20. So if I lay this on the table, they can hand it right back to me because that's all it's good for. So it's a recursive definition. It's a unitless measure, and what it means is that it can be inflated arbitrarily. So what we've done instead is we've said, okay, we'd love to use a basket of goods. We'd love to say that it is an ounce of gold, for example, or it is 1,000th of an ounce of gold, which is what the gold backs do. The problem is that gold can be manipulated just like any other commodity. And we've seen that through the last couple of 100 years. We've seen gold manipulated by law, by fiat, by all kinds of methods. And so gold is not immune from manipulation, nor is silver, nor is anything else. So we say, okay, well, let's take a basket of goods. This is one of the things that is used in some of the backed currencies. Well, who's going to decide which goods are in the basket? You get a committee. And after 10 years, the committee is politicized, and now they're taking this one out and they're putting this one in. And so what we said is, well, what if we could include every commodity? Why don't we make an every commodity index? And that's what we've done, is we've said, okay, we're going to take every economy through the world, we're going to take these numbers, put them into a formula, and we're going to say, how much is the value of 1 hour of unskilled labor worldwide, normalized across borders, cultures, tariffs, all these other distortions that exist in the world. And we're just going to say, that's what it is. And we're going to expect that that number is going to kind of, when we measure it against the dollar, it's going to kind of trickle up like this, because we know that the dollar is going down like this, and we're going to hope that that's counter-inflationary. So that's the answer about why we picked a unit of measure that is not unitless, that actually is bound to a real-world commodity. And we picked labor because I can buy up all the gold reserves in the world and dominate the gold market, but I can't buy up all the labor in the world, because everybody comes with their own private supply of it. We're going to go here next. And
we need to wrap this up.
Okay, we can do that. Well, I just have a $10 tally here, and it says it's worth $30.19. So that means that $3.19, $3 is the going.
So the $3 is an estimate, and if you print the contract behind that tally, then you can actually read what your 10 chips are worth. Okay. All right. So you want to wrap it up, or?
Stephen wanted me. He had to take off, and he wants me to wrap this up and make sure everyone.
Well, let me say that you've all been an amazing audience. All of your questions are extremely intelligent and awesome, and it's been great. And if I can give each of you a tally stick before you go, I'd love to do that. And I got a box of them here for you. So, thanks.